Hola, clase. Today we'll be talking about Gramática 7.1, which is reflexive verbs. And you can find this in your textbook on pages 236 a 237. So that's the textbook pages. And as always, I'll be going over this PowerPoint for you. So a reflexive verb is used to indicate that the subject does something to or for himself or herself. In other words, it reflects the action of the verb back onto the subject. So usually, often verbs go outward, or the action of the verb goes outward. So you're talking to someone, whereas if you're walking down the street, for example, and there's no one there, but you're still talking out loud, you're talking to yourself. That would be considered reflexively. So in Spanish, reflexive verbs always use reflexive pronouns. So an example here says, Joaquín se ducha por la mañana. This is a reflexive verb, se ducha. And these are the forms. So here it gives you an example of the verb lavarse, which means to wash oneself. So you're washing yourself. You're not washing somebody or something else. So you notice that if you don't look at the SE at the end here for lavarse, it's just a regular AR verb. So the endings of the verbs conjugate the same as any regular AR verb, such as hablar, right? So you notice here in the first one, you have lavo. The only difference is that you have these what are called reflexive pronouns. So you say me lavo. So I wash myself, okay? So let's just go through the forms and you can repeat after me. Repita, me lavo. Te lavas, se lava. So that's the same form for usted, él, and ella. Nos lavamos, and we skip vosotros, and then we go to the ustedes, ellos, and ellas, se lavan. So again, you notice the endings are the same. Lavo, lavas, lava, lavamos, lavan. No, same as a normal AR verb or an ER verb or an IR verb. The only difference is that you conjugate them with these, me, te, se, and nos, right? So those are not optional or anything. That's what makes the verb reflexive. So when the pronoun se attached to an infinitive identifies the verb as a reflexive. So if you see a verb just on its own and it's presented with a se at the end, that's the default, that's the infinitive, that's the unpersonalized form. That means to wash oneself. So like object pronouns, which we looked at in last chapter, or chapters 5 and 6, actually, where you place these depends on a few things. So if you have a conjugated verb with the reflexive verb, you can put it in front of it, as in down here, ellos se van a vestir, or you can connect it to the end, ellos van a vestirse. And like all the other ones, there's no change in meaning. They both mean they are going to get dressed. The same happens with the progressive tense when you have a present participle. So you can put it before the estar, conjugated estar. So you can say nos estamos lavando las manos, or you can attach it to the present participle. Estamos lavándonos las manos. But remember, if you do attach it here, you have to put an accent over the vowel right next to the N. So it's always going to be an A or an E. And it's the one either right before the N or to the left of the N, however you want to remember that. That's only if you attach it to the end. Okay, so we see here the same, this is what I was just saying, but this gives you an example with an IR verb, right? So bañando turns into bañándose. If you attach it to the end, the accent's over the A, right? Next to the N. And then durmiendo, if you say durmiéndose, then the accent goes on the E again, right next to the N. So here's a whole list of common reflexive verbs. This is also in your textbook. Many of them are stem changing verbs. So you'll notice that's indicated here by the little parentheses, and it tells you the U to O to, it tells you the type of stem change. So is it an O to UE? Is it an E to an IE? Or is it an E to an I? Those are the three types. All right, so I'm going to go through these quickly. You can look at the English. So the first one, so you can repeat after me. Acordarse. So the stem change there is a UE. So you say me acuerdo, te acuerdas, se acuerda, nos acordamos, and se acuerdan. All right. To go to bed, repita, acostarse. Again, same type of stem changes here. So you say me acuesto, te acuesta, se acuesta, etc. Afeitarse, bañarse, cepillarse, despertarse. So this is an E to IE stem change. So the stem change happens here. So you say me despierto, te despiertas, se despierta, nos despertamos y se despiertan. Okay, for dormir, you already know this verb, but this is just a reflexive form, which means typically to fall asleep. So repita, dormirse. And this, of course, is the stem change here. Me duermo, te duermes, se duerme, etc. Ducharse. Enojarse. Irse. So this is like the normal verb ir, which on its own means to go, but when you make it reflexive, it means to go away or to leave. So there's a slight change. So the verb ir still conjugates the same, voy, vas, va, vamos, van, but now you use it with the reflexive. So me voy, te vas, se va, nos vamos, se van. Lavarse. Levantarse. Right, now over in this column, llamarse. So this is, now you understand when you say me llamo, it's a reflexive verb. I call myself, right, to be named. I name myself Kevin. Me llamo Kevin. ¿Cómo te llamas? Me llamo Marco, etc. Okay, continuando. Maquillarse. Careful with the pronunciation here, the Q-U-I, it's key, like the key that you put in a door in English, right? It's not qui. So maquillarse. Okay, continuando. Peinarse. Ponerse. So ponerse is from the verb poner, which if you remember is irregular. So you say pongo in the first person, and the rest is normal. Pones, pone, ponemos, ponen, but used reflexively. So me pongo, te pones, etc. And on its own, it means to put on. In other words, to put on clothing. So me pongo los zapatos, me pongo la camiseta, me pongo los pantalones, etc. If you use it with an adjective, it can mean to become or to get. So in English, we say, oh, I get angry or I get sad. You can say, me pongo triste, me pongo enojado, right? To get or to become. Vale, continuando, preocuparse. Probarse. This is a stem change, and it means to try on, like clothing. So if you want to try on the pants before you buy them, you'd say, me pruebo. Te pruebas, se prueba, nos probamos, se prueban. That's a stem change. Quedarse. Quitarse. Again, notice the pronunciation. Qui, not qui. Quitarse. Secarse. Sentarse, which is a stem change, E to IE here. So you say, me siento, te sientas, se sienta, nos sentamos, y se sientan. Sentirse. So this is the same verb, except for it's an IR ending, but it means to feel. Same stem change. Me siento, te sientes. Notice the endings here are for IR though. Se siente, nos sentimos, y se sienten. So similar in form, but two different meanings. And then lastly, vestirse. And this is an E to an I stem change. So you say, me visto. This is where the stem changes. Te vistes, se viste, nos vestimos, y se visten. Muy bien. So again, all of these verbs are in your textbook, so you'll want to spend some time with them. So one thing that's interesting is many of those verbs can be used non-reflexively. And so it basically just boils down to, is the action falling back on the speaker or is it going outward? So if we look at these two pictures, and this first one, we see that Lola is washing plates. So the washing is going away. She's not washing herself. So you say Lola lava los platos. So this is, here you don't use the verb reflexively. There's no se, right? Whereas in this one, Lucia is washing her face. You would say Lucia se lava la cara because she's washing her own face. So that can happen with a lot of these verbs, right? So for instance, to go to bed, you can put yourself to bed or you could put your kid to bed. So if you're putting your kid to bed, you wouldn't use this reflexively. You would say acuesto a mi niño, right? You could shave yourself, you could shave someone or something else. You could say me afeito, or you could say afeito al perro. You shave the dog, right? Same with bañar, cepillar. I mean, many of these can, some, not all, but many of these can be used unreflexively. So just keep that in mind. And lastly, in Spanish, we don't use possessives to talk about clothing or body parts. So for instance, in Spanish, you would say, la niña se quitó un zapato, which the literal translation in English, you would understand, would be the little girl takes off a shoe, but in Spanish, it would be understood as the little girl takes off her shoe, right? So by using the article, it's still understood that it's saying her or his or mine or whatever. So for instance, here as well, necesito cepillarme los dientes, right? Whereas in English, you would say, I need to brush my teeth, because this would sound weird if you were doing a word for word. I need to brush the teeth. But in Spanish, it does not sound weird. In Spanish, that's how it's supposed to be said. And it's understood as I need to brush my teeth. ¿Vale? Ok, bien. Entonces vamos a cerrar esto y hacer algunas actividades. Y la primera actividad que haremos es elegir. So again, if you'd like to follow along in your textbook, pages 236 to 239. And we are at, let's look at the instructions. Dice, elige la forma adecuada del verbo reflexivo para completar cada oración. So we have to make sure that it makes sense. So you guys know the drill. I'll tell you to pause, and then you pause the video, and when you're ready, you come back and give and see if the answer is right. So here we go. Lionel Messi siempre te acuestas, se acuesta o se acuestan a dormir unas horas cuando termina de almorzar. Pausa. And we're back. So here would be se acuesta, right? Because we're talking about Lionel Messi. So it has to agree. Se acuesta goes with él, right? So he goes to bed. And then we continue. Tú también te vas, se va o nos vamos a dormir la siesta después del mediodía. Pausa. And we're back. Here would be te vas because it says tú también. So we know that we're talking in the tú form. Número 2. Debemos blank los dientes después de cada comida. So would we say debemos cepillarnos o cepillarse? Pausa. Y hemos vuelto cepillarnos. We know cepillarnos because debemos is conjugated for nosotros. ¿Sí? Nosotros debemos cepillarnos. Número 3. Algunas personas blank por la mañana. Me ducho, nos duchamos, se duchan. Pausa. Y volvimos. Se duchan porque algunas personas, ellas, ¿no? A mí me gusta bañarme, bañarte o bañarse por la noche. Pausa. Y hemos vuelto bañarme porque a mí me gusta. ¿Sí? A mí me gusta. Es la única opción correcta. 4. Todas las noches, Laura blank bien la cara. So, Laura me lava, te lava o se lava. Pausa. Y hemos vuelto, se lava, porque Laura, sí, ella se lava bien la cara para quitarse el maquillaje, quitarse o quitarnos el maquillaje. Maquillaje means makeup. Pausa. Y sería quitarse, because we're still talking about Laura. So to take off the makeup off herself, right? Bien. 5. Profesor, usted blank muy temprano para llegar a tiempo a escuela. So we say, usted te levantas, se levanta, nos levantamos. Pausa. Y volvimos. Sería, se levanta porque usted va con se levanta. Muy bien. Finalmente, número 6. Daniel y Virginia, te despiertas, nos despertamos, se despiertan y salen a desayunar en un café los domingos. Pausa. Y hemos vuelto sería se despiertan, porque hablamos de Daniel y Virginia. Entonces, ellos se despiertan. Excelente. Continuemos. Hagamos una actividad más. Y aquí está la actividad. So dice completar. Fill in the blanks with the correct present tense forms of the indicated verbs. Pretty straightforward. So similar to the last one. Okay, so here we have número 1. Marcos y Gustavo y el verbo es enojarse con Javier. Pausa. Y volvimos. Aquí diríamos Marcos y Gustavo se enojan. Right? Because it's the verb enojarse. And we conjugate it for ellos. Bien. Número 2. Mariela blank feliz. Sentirse. Pausa. And we're back. It would be helpful to maybe look in your textbook here so you can have recollection of which verbs are stem change, so that you can look on this page 237, right? And it'll tell you which verbs are stem changes here, okay? So this is sentirse, which is on that list is a stem change. So Mariela se siente feliz. That means to feel. So feels happy. 3. Acostarse para yo, no, for yo, temprano porque tengo clase por la mañana. Pausa. Y volvimos. This is also a stem change, a UE, so me acuesto. Yo me acuesto temprano. 4. Los jugadores, and the verb is secarse, con toallas nuevas. New towels, that's how you say towel, toalla. Toalla, it's a weird pronunciation, toalla. Pausa. Y volvimos. Se secan. Porque los jugadores, entonces ellos. Bien. Tú, preocuparse por tu novio porque siempre pierde las cosas. Pausa. Y volvimos. Tú te preocupes. Right? Because we know it's tú. That's how you conjugate the verb preocuparse. I'm sorry, preocupas. Preocupas, but I caught that. It's an AR verb, right? I was thinking it's very common. You say no te preocupes with es, but that's something totally else. That's a command form. That's why I use an e there. Don't worry about that. That's much more advanced Spanish. So here it's definitely an a. Preocupas. Okay. 6. Usted. And the verb is lavarse la cara con un jabón especial. Pausa. Y volvimos. Se lava, right? Because usted goes with the se form. So se lava la cara. Wash your face with a special soap. Okay, lastly, número 7. Mi mamá, y el verbo es ponerse, muy contenta cuando llego temprano a casa. Pausa. Y hemos vuelto. Se pone. So this is with an adjective, which is contenta. So we know that means gets. So you translate this as my mom gets happy when I come home early. Se pone. Muy bien, clase. Entonces, espero que eso haya ayudado y we'll stop there. So see you next time. If you have any questions, of course, please email me. Hasta luego.